The glass wall sit was a quiet morning at the Google campus in Mountain View. The sky was still painting itself in soft shades of orange and pink, and the dew on the grass shimmered like tiny stars. Sundar Pichai had arrived earlier than usual. He liked the stillness of these early hours. No meetings yet, no noise, no distractions. Just silence, coffee, and thoughts. He walked through the wide halls of the main building, where the glass walls reflected both the innovation inside and the humanity outside. It was a space built not just for ideas, but for the people who created them. On his way to the cafe, Sundar paused to watch a team of janitors cleaning the glass panels. They moved carefully with precision and pride, ensuring every inch sparkled. One of them, a woman in her 60s with graying hair tied in a bun, was humming a song. Sundar gave her a small nod. She smiled warmly and nodded back. She didn't know who he was. He liked that. It reminded him of home. As he entered the cafe, Sundar noticed something that pulled his attention like a magnet. Across the room, a man in an expensive tailored suit stood towering over a young employee seated in a wheelchair. The man's face was red with anger, and his voice, though not loud, carried the sharp sting of superiority. He was scolding the young man harshly, something about delays, performance, and expectations. People around them kept their eyes down, pretending not to notice, but their ears were clearly tuned in. The tension in the room was thick. Sundar's steps slowed. Thought the man in the wheelchair looked like he was in his 20s. His body was stiff, his hands rested on his lap awkwardly, but his eyes, they held a storm of emotions. Frustration, hurt, and a quiet kind of endurance that only people who've suffered silently for a long time carry. He said nothing. He didn't interrupt. He just sat there, letting the insults rain down like acid. His cheeks flushed and his lips trembled ever so slightly. Sundar recognized the man doing the yelling. His name was Bradley Keene, a CEO of a tech firm that recently partnered with Google on an AI research initiative. His company was small but powerful, known for its aggressive culture and high returns. Sundar had met him twice before at dinners. Boardrooms and briefings. Bradley was sharp, arrogant, and deeply proud of his empire. He also believed in results at any cost. Sundar had never liked him. Bradley didn't see Sundar standing just a few feet behind him. He continued, "Do you think we hired you out of pity? Do you think we lower the bar because of your condition? You were hired to deliver, and if you can't, someone else will." Sundar felt a strange tightness in his chest. It wasn't just about the cruelty of the words. It was the way they were delivered, calculated, surgical, and full of disdain. The young man's name tag, read, Kai. Sundar didn't know his story, but in that moment, he felt a responsibility heavier than anything he had felt in weeks. No one moved. No one intervened. The glass walls around them reflected a scene that looked too painful to be real. Bradley turned, finally noticing Sundar standing behind him. He straightened up, adjusted his cufflinks, and forced a smile. "Oh, Mr. Pichai," he said, trying to inject charm into his voice. "I was just having a firm discussion with one of your people." "You know how it is." Sundar didn't smile. He looked at Kai, then at the crowd that had quietly resumed sipping coffee and scrolling through their phones. "Yes," Sundar said calmly. "I know exactly how it is." Bradley gave a short laugh, thinking he had smoothed things over. "This one," he gestured to Kai, "needs to learn how the world works. There's no special treatment out there." Kai remained silent. His eyes briefly met Sundar's, then quickly looked away. He looked ashamed, embarrassed, like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Sundar turned to Kai. "What's your name?" "Kai? Kai Mitchell," the young man replied, barely above a whisper. "And how long have you been with us?" Sundar asked gently. 7 months, Kai said. Sundar nodded. "And in that time, have you done your best every day?" Kai looked up slowly. There was a flicker of something changing in his eyes. Not pride yet, but a hint of it. "Yes, sir. Every single day." Sundar smiled, just slightly. "Then that's all I need to hear." The room was dead quiet now. Bradley looked confused. "With all due respect, Mr. Pichai, this is a performance issue. Nothing personal. Sundar turned toward him, his voice still calm, still soft. But his words carried weight. Respect is always personal, he said. How you speak to people, especially those who can't fight back, says more about your company than any profit margin ever could. Bradley's smile faded. Sundar continued. If someone is struggling, we help. We ask questions. We show empathy. We don't belittle them in public like we're still living in some hierarchy of power where the loudest voice wins. Bradley stiffened. I wasn't, you were, Sundar interrupted. And you weren't just yelling at an employee. You were attacking a person's dignity? That has consequences. There was a shift in the room, subtle but real. The people around them began to look up. Some started recording quietly. Others just watched wide-eyed. Bradley looked around, realizing the spotlight he had accidentally stepped into. Are you saying I should apologize to him? Bradley asked, half laughing. No, Sundar said. I'm saying you should think about whether your values align with ours. Because if they don't, this partnership ends today. The words hit like thunder. Bradley's face went pale. He had never been spoken to like this. Not in his world, where money and power made him untouchable. You can't be serious. He said, I've never been more serious, Sundar replied. He turned to Kai, who still looked stunned. Come by my office later. I want to hear more about your work. Kai's lips parted, but no words came out. Just a slow nod. His eyes glistened with something unspoken. Sundar walked away, but his mind was spinning. Something about this moment wouldn't leave him, not because he had made a point, but because he realized just how many people like Kai were hiding behind smiles, swallowing pain, trying to survive in a world that still hadn't learned how to be kind. And he wondered how many more Bradleys were out there, breaking spirits with polished shoes and power suits. As he reached the hallway, his phone buzzed. It was a message from someone in HR. Pichai. There's something you should see regarding Kai Mitchell. In single quotes, S. important. He stopped walking. There it was, the first twist. A quiet sense that something deeper was happening behind the scenes, and this was just the beginning. Asterisk, the file Sundar stood in the hallway, staring at the glowing screen of his phone. The message from HR was short, but it carried the unmistakable weight of urgency. He had learned over years of leadership how to read between the lines. And this message didn't just ask for his attention, it demanded it. He turned back toward the elevators, his footsteps slower now. Mind tangled in possibilities. The moment with Bradley was still fresh in his memory. The shame in Kai's eyes. The arrogance dripping from Bradley's words. And the eerie silence of the room, people watching, not helping. It bothered Sundar deeply. Not because of the optics, but because he knew what silence like that could do to a person's soul. How it allowed cruelty to live, to grow, to become acceptable. As the elevator doors opened, Sundar entered and pressed the button for the 5th floor. HR. The ride-up was quiet, too quiet. He thought about Kai, young, soft-spoken, clearly intelligent, but carrying something heavy behind those eyes. Sundar knew that look. He had seen it in people who had been through things they never spoke about, things that left invisible scars. He had worn that look himself once long ago, when he was just a boy in Chennai walking through dust-covered streets with holes in his shoes and dreams too big for the world he lived in. When he stepped into the HR office, the head of the department, Maria Fernandez, was already waiting. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said, her voice low, controlled. What's this about Kai Mitchell? Sundar asked without delay. Maria gestured toward her desk. A slim folder sat on top. Not digital. Paper. That meant it was serious. We received this from a whistleblower late last night. Anonymous, she explained, handing him the folder. I was about to bring it to your attention when your encounter with Mr. Mitchell happened this morning. Sundar took the folder and opened it. Inside were several pages of printed emails, incident reports, and one photograph, grainy, black, and white, but powerful enough to send a chill down his spine. What am I looking at? he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria leaned in. Kai used to work at a private defense tech company, one of our partners. He was a top-level researcher in ethical AI systems, known for challenging unsafe practices. According to these documents, he exposed illegal testing being done on disabled individuals, experiments involving unapproved neural implants. It triggered a quiet investigation, and several executives were forced to resign. But the scandal never went public. Kai vanished shortly after. Sundar's eyes widened as he read more. The documents painted a harrowing story of corruption, hidden abuse, and the bravery of a young who risked everything to do the right thing. There were internal memos where Kai's name had been redacted, only now reappearing because someone inside wanted the truth to come out. Why didn't he tell anyone? Sundar asked. We believe he was silenced with legal threats and forced out of the industry. He went from leading research teams to doing entry-level support roles, quietly. Humbly. It's like he was trying to disappear. Sundar closed the folder and sat down. His heart felt heavy. This wasn't just a story about workplace cruelty anymore. This was bigger. Kai It wasn't just a disabled employee being bullied. He was a whistleblower, a hero who had been buried by the very system he tried to protect. And Bradley Keene, the CEO who had yelled at him, had once been affiliated with that same defense company. Not as a full employee, but as a board advisor. Sundar leaned forward. Do we know if Bradley recognized him? Maria shook her head. There's no evidence of that, but it's possible. Especially if Kai testified internally. Bradley would have had access to those reports. A deep silence settled in the room. Sundar rubbed his forehead slowly, absorbing everything. I want you to speak with legal, he said finally, and tell security to pull all building footage from the last week. If Kai is being followed, monitored, or mistreated in any way, we need to know. Quietly. No leaks. Maria nodded firmly. Understood. As Sundar walked out of the office, the folder still in his hand, he felt something ignite inside him. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. A sense of responsibility, of injustice that had found its way into his company. And he knew he couldn't look away. He had built Google into a place that valued innovation, inclusion, and dignity. And yet, someone like Kai had slipped through the cracks. Not because the system failed, but because the people around him didn't. See the story behind the silence. As he walked back to his office, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a calendar notification. A scheduled board meeting with Bradley and the other executives in 30 minutes. The irony made him stop walking. For a second, he looked down at his phone. Then back at the folder. Maybe this meeting was more than just routine. Maybe. It was the stage where truth was finally going to speak. He made a decision. He would attend the meeting, but this time, he wouldn't just listen. He would confront, not just Bradley, but the culture that allowed someone like Kai to be broken in silence. When Sundar entered his office, Kai was already there, sitting nervously on the couch, his eyes darting toward the floor. You wanted to see me, sir? Kai asked. Quietly, Sundar nodded and closed the door behind him. He sat across from the young man, studying his face closely. I saw what happened this morning. I want to talk about it. But first, I want to hear from you. Kai hesitated. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I try to stay quiet. Stay out of the way. Why? Sundar asked. Kai's shoulders slumped. Because it's easier. People look at me and assume I'm weak or slow or a charity case. I've learned not to fight it. It's exhausting. But you're not weak, Sundar said gently. And you're not invisible. I know about the company you worked at before. The investigation. What you did. Kai's eyes widened. The color drained from his face. How do you know? That? He asked, almost panicking. Someone sent us the file, Sundar replied. Anonymously. Kai looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't want it to come out. I signed papers. Non-disclosures. I just wanted to move on. You were brave, Sundar said. What you did took more strength than most people will ever understand. Kai shook his head. I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my ability to walk. They used me as a test subject. And when I spoke up, they destroyed me. That's not bravery, that's stupidity. No, Sundar said, always firmer now. That's exactly what bravery is. Doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. Tears welled in Kai's eyes. Not from pity, but from hearing something he hadn't heard in a long time validation. There's a board meeting today, Sundar continued. Bradley will be there. I want you to attend, not as a victim, not as an employee, but as a witness. Kai's eyes widened again. Me? Why? Because truth should be seen, Sundar said softly. And because maybe it's time the powerful remember who they're standing on. Kai didn't answer. He just nodded slowly, silently outside the window. The sky had shifted. The sunlight was sharp now, casting long shadows across the floors, and somewhere far below, Bradley Keene was walking into a meeting room, completely unaware that justice was about to knock on his door. Asterisk the meeting room, boardroom on the 10th. Floor was made of glass and stone. From the outside, it looked like a modern marvel's sleek walls, glowing digital displays, and a long polished table that could seat 20. But today, it felt like a courtroom, the kind where the truth didn't always walk in with a loud voice, but arrived quietly, calmly wrapped in silence and steady eyes. Sundar stood near the entrance, watching as board members, senior executives, and invited guests entered one by one. They greeted each other with handshakes, practiced smiles, and the kind of small talk that held no real weight. Bradley Keene arrived 10 minutes early, as usual, his posture confident, his suit impeccable, and his arrogance masked by charm. He took a seat at the far end of the table, like a king returning to his court. When he noticed Sundar across the room, he gave a small wave and a nod, still oblivious to what was coming. Sundar didn't return the gesture. Instead, he waited until everyone was seated before finally stepping forward. But he wasn't alone. Dot behind him, rolling into the room in his sleek black wheelchair, came Kai Mitchell. You could hear the silence ripple across the space like a quiet storm. Some eyebrows raised. Others whispered to their neighbors. Bradley single quotes. Jaw tightened ever so slightly. For a moment, his eyes flickered not with surprise, but with recognition. And that's when Sundar knew. Bradley hadn't just been cruel to Kai this morning. He had known exactly who Kai was. Thank you all for coming, Sundar began, standing at the head of the table. Before we begin, I want to talk about something that goes beyond metrics, projections, or quarterly returns. He paused, letting the silence settle deeper. This morning, something happened in our cafeteria. Something most of you may not have seen, but something that matters more than any spreadsheet we'll review today. A young employee was publicly humiliated by a partner executive. Not for failing to do his job, not for breaking rules, but simply for existing differently. For having the courage to show up every day despite the weight he carries. Some board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned in. This employee's name is Kai Mitchell, and he's here today. Not because I asked him to be a spectacle, but because I believe he represents something we've forgotten in our race to the top human dignity. Kai remained quiet, his hand resting gently on his lap, but his eyes held steady. He wasn't this scared, quiet figure from the morning. There was a calmness about him now, a still strength, like someone who had finally decided to stop running from his past. Mr. Pichai, Bradley interrupted, his voice tight. If this is about what happened earlier, I think it's being blown out of proportion. I was holding him accountable. That's leadership. Sundar turned to him. Is it leadership to raise your voice in a room full of people? To humiliate someone publicly when a private conversation could have sufficed? Or is it just power hiding behind a title? Bradley opened his mouth, but Sundar raised a hand. Before you answer, he said, pulling the folder from his briefcase and placing it on the table. I want everyone in this room to read something. He handed copies of the documents from HR to each board member. The room filled with the soft rustling of papers. The memos, the whistleblower reports, the incident summaries. and the grainy black and white photo of Kai strapped to a testing chair, wires running from the back of his neck, eyes swollen from a recent seizure. You could hear breathing shift across the room. Maria, the hourhead, stepped forward to speak. These documents confirm that Kai was a whistleblower at a former defense tech firm, she explained. He exposed a classified human trial involving disabled individuals, which included himself. He suffered both physical and psychological trauma as a result. After legal threats and blacklisting, he was forced out of the industry. Gasps. Hands covered mouths. Others stared at the photo in disbelief. Kai spoke now, his voice calm, not angry. Just honest. I didn't want this to come out, he said. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of proving my worth. I joined Google hoping to start fresh, to work in silence, to contribute quietly. He paused, his eyes scanning the faces around the table. But silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's survival. His words echoed like thunder. In the quiet, Bradley scoffed. This is ridiculous. I wasn't even working full-time with that company. I was an advisor. I had nothing to do with that experiment. Yet your name appears here, Maria said, tapping one of the memos, as a member of the oversight committee. The one responsible for approving those trials. Bradley's face paled. Those documents are years old, irrelevant now. They're not irrelevant to Kai, Sundar said. And they're not irrelevant to us. He stepped forward, his voice soft but sharp as steel. We don't partner with companies or leaders who believe dignity is optional. We don't reward cruelty. And we certainly don't stay silent when justice is owed. He turned to the board. I propose we terminate all contracts and research projects with Bradley Keene's firm effective immediately. I also recommend we report these findings to the Ethics Oversight Committee for further review. There was a brief silence. Then, one by one, board members began nodding. Bradley stood up. You'll regret this, he snapped. Cutting ties. With us will cost you millions. I'll take this public. I'll sue for defamation. You're free to do what you must, Sundar said quietly. But know this, we don't operate by fear. We operate by values. Bradley looked around the room, but no one met his eyes. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The room. Sudden stillness. No applause. No celebration. Just a shared awareness that something big had just happened. Kai exhaled. The weight lifting off him was almost visible. Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not invisible anymore, he whispered, and just then, for the first time in what felt like years, Kai smiled, but the story wasn't over. As the meeting ended and the room slowly emptied, Maria approached Sundar once again. There's something else, she said, pulling out her phone. Kai's not the only one. She showed him an email that had just arrived. Another whistleblower, anonymous again, same company, same pattern, same victims. Sundar stared at the screen. This wasn't one story. This was a pattern, a hidden empire, built on silence and suffering. And now that the door had been opened, the truth was coming fast. Asterisk buried voices. Hallway outside the boardroom was quiet now. But Sundar didn't feel relief. He stood still, staring at Maria's phone, the anonymous email glowing like a flare in the dark. His mind moved quickly, linking fragments of information that had once seemed disconnected. Kai's silence. The photo, Bradley's anger, the whistleblower reports, and now this. Another survivor. Another voice buried deep beneath legal silence and corporate power. The email was written in plain language. There was no dramatic language, no emotional appeals, just truth laid bare. The sender identified themselves only as M422, a codey name likely meant to protect their identity. They claimed to have worked at the same defense tech firm as Kai. Like Kai. They weren't a test subject. They were on the other side, an insider. They admitted to helping design the experimental AI interface. At first, they believed they were changing lives. But once the project moved from lab to field, they realized the cost. Disabled volunteers were promised help, but what they received was pain. And when someone tried to speak up, they vanished, quietly reassigned, fired, or bought off. I stayed silent because I was scared. The email read, "But seeing what Kai did and how he stood up again, even after losing everything, I can't live with the guilt anymore. If you want to know the truth, follow the money." Project Code, Titan's Edge, everything started there. Sundar read the message twice. Then again, Titan single quotes S Edge. He had heard of it before. Not by name, but by whispers, rumors passed in hushed conversations at international tech summits and government briefings. Some said it was a black ops initiative. Others believed it was just vapor code names meant to scare competitors. Now, it had a name, a connection, and real consequences. He looked up at Maria. We need a team. Internal security, legal, data ethics, and 2 people from the AI Oversight Committee. Now. Today. Maria didn't hesitate. I'll call them. Should I keep Kai informed? Sundar paused. Yes, he said. He deserves to know. But keep it quiet. No emails. Face-to-face only. As Maria left to assemble the team, Sundar walked down to his private office. For the first time in years, he felt like he was stepping into unknown territory. This wasn't a product launch or a regulatory concern. This was deeper, more human, more dangerous. He sat at his desk and pulled up his internal access dashboard. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He typed in Titan's Edge into the classified access portal, not expecting much. But what appeared next made him sit up straight. Access denied. Clearance restricted. Even a CEO. He didn't have access. A chill crept up his spine. He tapped into the legal infrastructure database and searched for indirect mentions, budget transfers, subcontracting patterns, research anomalies. And there it was. Over the past 5 years. Tens of millions had moved through a shell company that supplied adaptive AI solutions for medical resilience and battlefield integration. The recipient? A defense tech subsidiary owned by one of Bradley's close allies, a man named Conrad Blake, former intelligence officer turned billionaire contractor. Sundar remembered his name from an off-site summit. The man had once bragged about building technology that breaks people and rebuilds them smarter. Everything started to line up. Kai was never meant to be an engineer. He was a trial subject who escaped. Bradley wasn't yelling because Kai had failed. He was yelling because Kai had survived. Sundar leaned back in his chair, the weight of the truth pressing against his chest. His heart ached, not just for Kai, but for every person who had been used, then discarded. It was a feeling he knew too well. As a boy, he had seen workers in his neighborhood fall sick from factory toxins, then vanish from their jobs without explanation. He had watched his own father proud, skilled be passed over again and again by men who wore soap ties but had no soul. That pain never left him. And now it was back. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Maria stepped in, followed by 5 people, his internal response team. Their expressions were tight, professional, but beneath it was curiosity and worry. He stood and addressed them immediately. We've uncovered a pattern, a hidden project called Titan's Edge, tied to illegal AI testing on disabled individuals, including one of our employees. This is not a theoretical discussion. This is happening. And we may be standing on the edge of a scandal larger than any we've seen in tech. He handed them printouts of the documents. I want every legal path reviewed. I want every data trail tracked. And I want to protect Kai at all costs. We owe him that. We owe them all that. The team members exchanged looks, but nodded in agreement. One of them, Dr. Samir Adil from the AI Ethics Division, spoke up. I've heard of Titan's Edge, buried deep under layered contracts. If we go after this, it's not just corporate. We'll be crossing into military territories. Then we go carefully, Sundar said. But we go. Just then, another knock. This time it was Kai. He rolled in slowly, his posture tense. Sundar stood to greet him. You okay? Sundar asked. Kai nodded, but his eyes were serious. I got a message. Someone from my old firm. They said I should stop digging, or I'll regret it. Everyone in the room froze. Maria leaned forward. A threat? Kai nodded. It was vague, but clear enough. They know I talked. And now they know about you too. Sundar felt something cold crawl into the room. He had faced political pushback, lawsuits, even activist protests. But this was different. This was personal. Dangerous, and it meant they were getting close. He walked over to Kai and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. We don't back down because of fear. He said, we push forward because others can't. Kai's jaw clenched. I'm ready. The room went silent. And then, slowly, Sundar smiled. Good, he said. Because tomorrow we go public. Gasps filled the room. Maria stepped forward. You mean a press statement? No, Sundar replied. A live panel, streamed globally. We'll reveal everything we can, legally. And we'll invite other survivors, insiders, anyone ready to speak. We'll put a spotlight so bright. They can't hide in shadows anymore. But what about retaliation? Asked Dr. Adil. Lawsuits? Government pushback? Let them come, Sundar said. I'd rather fall standing for the right thing than rise by pretending I didn't. See? And just like that, a plan began forming. Within minutes, they outlined the event. Truth in Technology, an emergency ethics forum. To be held in less than 24 hours. Live streamed on Google's homepage. Kai would speak. So would Maria, and possibly others if they were brave enough to step forward. Security was doubled. Backup servers were prepared in case of digital sabotage. Quietly, a letter was drafted to Conrad Blake informing him that his name had surfaced in connection with Titan's Edge. They knew he wouldn't stay silent. But Sundar didn't want silence anymore. He wanted noise. He wanted truth. To roar. As night fell over the city. Sundar stood at the top floor window, looking out at the distant lights of San Francisco. Tomorrow, he would risk everything, his career, his partnerships, his safety. But he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. And downstairs, Kai sat alone in a small break room, staring at the photo that had nearly destroyed him. Only now, it didn't hurt as much. Because this time, he wasn't alone. The broadcast the next morning arrived, like the calm before a storm. The Google campus, usually buzzing with light-hearted chatter, felt different. Heavier, sharper. Security teams moved discreetly through the halls, checking entrances, reinforcing network access points, and triple-checking the live streaming. Servers, a digital clock in the center atrium, counted down to 10 a.m. The moment the Truth in Technology event would begin. In his office, Sundar adjusted his collar in front of ear. There was no tie today, no scripted talking points. Just a simple shirt, rolled up sleeves, and a promise in his heart. Behind him, the conference room had been converted into a live studio, cameras, soft lighting, and a carefully placed backdrop. That read in bold, lowercase letters, we see you, we hear you. We stand with you. Maria sat nearby, preparing her notes. Kai was seated in the far corner, quiet, withdrawn, but focused. His eyes no longer darted toward exits or stayed fixed on the ground. Today, his gaze was forward, straight, steady, and determined. At 9:30. One of the tech leads entered the room. Sir, we're live across all platforms. YouTube, homepage banner, media networks. Full reach. Early estimates say over 8 million viewers are waiting. Sundar nodded. Make sure the stream has backup redundancy. No buffering, no interruptions. They'll try to shut this down. We're ready, the tech replied. As the final minutes ticked down. Sundar walked over to Kai. You don't have to do this, he said softly. If you change your mind, I'll speak alone. Kai shook his head. They tried to take my voice. They don't get to keep it. Sundar smiled. Then the countdown reached 0. The red light on the camera turned on. And the world started listening. Sundar stepped up to the podium first. His voice was calm but carried with it a gravity the audience could feel, even through a screen. Good morning, he began, and thank you for joining us from around the world. Today, this isn't a keynote. It's not a launch. And it's not a celebration. He paused, eyes locking on the lens as if he were speaking directly into each home, office, and heart across the globe. Today is about truth. A truth that has been buried, hidden beneath boardrooms, cloaked in contracts, and silenced by fear. He then revealed Kai's story, not the watered-down version, but the raw truth. About the illegal experiments, the betrayal of trust, the silence that followed. He spoke of Project Titan's Edge, of Bradley Keene, of Conrad Blake. He didn't accuse without evidence. He showed the documentation, emails, photos, redacted memos. Payment trails. Kai was introduced not as a victim, but as a survivor, as someone who had paid the price for integrity and then quietly rebuilt himself with resilience most people couldn't imagine. Kai rolled to the front of the room. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence spoke for him. Then he began slowly. They said I was lucky to be chosen. They said the tests were for my benefit. They said I'd walk again, that I'd think faster, live better. But all I got was pain. He paused, his voice trembling, but growing stronger. And when I spoke up, they erased me. They took my name off research papers. They blacklisted me. I became a liability to their progress. He turned to Sundar, then looked back at the camera. But not here, not anymore. The live chat on the screen began flooding with messages of support. Hearts, fire emojis, and the simple word repeated over and over again, call on brave. Sundar returned to the podium. We're not just here to expose. We're here to rebuild. Today, Google commits to funding an independent global AI ethics alliance, led by voices like Kai's, to ensure that no technology, no matter how advanced, will ever come at the cost of a human soul. Just then, a flicker. The screen dimmed. For 2 seconds, the live stream froze. In the control room, alarms began flashing. The lead tech's voice buzzed into Sundar's earpiece. Sir? Someone's trying to breach the stream. They're launching a DDoS attack. Maria stood up immediately, eyes narrowing. How bad? It's coordinated. Over 1 million simultaneous requests hitting the servers. Sundar didn't flinch. Switch to satellite stream, reroute to Europe backup servers, cut access from hostile IP zones. Already on it, the tech replied. Within seconds. The stream recovered. Viewers saw a brief glitch, but it came back stronger, louder. Sundar leaned forward. They tried to silence us again, but we're still here. Cheers erupted from behind the camera. Techs, staff, and employees watching in nearby lounges applauded. People stood. Some cried. And then something unexpected happened. On the live stream chat, a message appeared. My name is Elena. I was one of the test subjects too. Kai saved me. I'm ready to speak. A few seconds later, Jonathan, here. They threatened my daughter to keep me quiet. No more silence. One by one, survivors began coming forward. Names, stories, confessions, pouring in from places Sundar didn't even know existed. By noon, over 100,000 whistleblowers and victims had joined the new digital witness forum launched alongside the event. News outlets picked up the story instantly. Headlines exploded. Google CEO exposes dark side of AI testing. Disabled engineer hailed as hero after revealing unethical trials. World finally hears from the silenced. Conrad Blake's legal team issued a brief statement, calling the accusations unfounded and irresponsible. But the damage was already done. Politicians demanded inquiries. Tech companies scrambled to review their partnerships. The White House announced a special ethics committee hearing. Back in the studio, Kai sat in quiet disbelief. Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. You started a movement, he said. Kai shook his head. We did. But the day wasn't over. In the final moments of the stream, Sundar made one more announcement. I've personally reached out to every major tech CEO to join us in an emergency ethics summit. No more silence. No more looking into it. We act, or we step aside. As the broadcast ended, the world outside felt different. People in subways watched the replay on their phones. Teachers paused classes to show their students that disabled communities from Kenya to Canada held live streams of their own, sharing their truths. And in a quiet home outside of Washington, D.C., an old man, once a janitor in the building where Titan's Edge was born, sat in his chair, tears running down his face. His grandson had once been one of those test subjects. And for the first time, someone had said out loud what he thought no one ever would, but just as Sundar was about to step outside for some air, Maria rushed in. Her face was pale. "We just got word," she said. "Conrad Blake is holding a press conference. Now, he's claiming Google fabricated the entire story to distract from internal corruption." Sundar's eyes narrowed. "Get me the feed," he said. "Because if the world thought this battle was over ... they were wrong." Asterisk, the reckoning sun was just beginning to set over Mountain View, casting a golden glow through the glass walls of Sundar Pichai's office. The room was quiet, but tension pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. Outside, the campus had become a gathering place. Employees, supporters, and media vans surrounded the perimeter, drawn by what had just unfolded. The live stream had changed everything. For the first time, people weren't just talking about innovation. They were talking about justice, about ethics, about Kai Dot, but inside, the war wasn't over. On the massive monitor in front of Sundar, a live press conference streamed in from Washington, D.C. The image showed Conrad Blake standing, tall behind a podium draped in an American flag. He wore a sharp navy blue suit, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, and his piercing gaze aimed straight into the camera. Flanked by lawyers and two stone-faced security guards, he looked calm. Too calm, the claims made by Sundar Pichai and his team at Google are not only false, Conrad said with a practiced steadiness. They are malicious. A calculated attempt to distract the public from Google's own internal AI controversies. Project Titan's Edge was a defense initiative that never reached human trials. Any images or documents shared were either doctored or taken out of context. I demand a full federal investigation into these accusations and call on the Department of Justice to hold those responsible for this defamation accountable. The reporters in the room erupted with questions, but the camera stayed on Conrad's cold, unmoved face. We will not be silenced by tech billionaires playing God. The feed cut out. A deep silence followed. Maria leaned forward from the couch. Across the room, he's going all in. If he gets the Doge involved, this could spiral. Public pressure won't be enough. We need something undeniable. Sundar turned to Kai, who sat quietly beside the window, the golden sunlight outlining his silhouette like a halo. "You said they kept logs?" Sundar asked. Kai nodded slowly. "Yes. During the trial phase, they used neural interface monitors. Everything, heart rate, response times, brainwave patterns, it was all recorded. And each session had a corresponding audio log. They were required by law to store it for safety compliance." Maria's eyes widened. "If we can find those logs?" Kai reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, encrypted USB drive. "Took a copy the night I escaped," he said softly. "I didn't know why. Part of me just couldn't leave it behind." Sundar's breath caught in his throat. "You've had this the whole time?" Kai nodded again. "I didn't trust anyone until now." Sundar called in his top digital forensics lead. Within 10 minutes, the drive was connected to an isolated, secure system, and the contents began to load. The files were real, time-stamped, unedited. Hundreds of recordings, documents, and logs cataloging the experiments. And then they heard it, got a voice, Conrad's voice, on a recording. Session 7. Subject responding slower. Increase stimulation by 10%. If he seizes, mark it as a resilience failure. They signed the waiver. We need results. There was the nail in the coffin. Maria closed her eyes. "We go public with this now." "No," Sundar said, voice heavy but clear. "We take it straight to the Justice Department, not through media, not through leaks, through truth, directly." He called a contact, a longtime government ethics advisor in D.C. within the hour. Sundar and Kai were scheduled for a private session with Dow investigators over a secure line. The evidence was sent in full, with authentication from 3 third-party firms. The next morning, the Department of Justice released a statement based on preliminary evidence received. The United States Department of Justice has opened a formal investigation into Project Titan's Edge and all affiliated contractors, including holdings under Conrad Blake. Whistleblowers are encouraged to come forward under federal protection. Transparency will be upheld. Conrad Blake's silence was deafening. Within hours, his company's stocks plummeted. Employees resigned. More survivors stepped forward. The empire was crumbling.